Good afternoon. For those of you that are, we actually had a morning session today that started at 10. We took a break at 12:30. So we're actually resuming our briefing session for today. And Chris Murphy's laughing at. And we actually were we had some long presentations this morning, not all of which were part of the presenter's fault. I'll accept some responsibility. But we do have, we're going to continue in that with Chris Murphy is going to give us a planning and development services update. And then we'll get to our visitors from Charlotte to talk about the Fitch ratings and kind of stuff. So thank you. Apologize, we're running just a little behind, but we're ready to go. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. And there we go. I am going to actually quickly turn this over to Amy Crum, who is our Assistant Plan Director, who's going to go over the initial part of this presentation, which is an update on our comprehensive plan Forward 2045. We have been actively working on that over the last couple of years, and Amy's going to give you an update of kind of where we stand, and some of that ties closely, some of the things that she's going to show you ties closely with some of the discussions that we had this morning related to sewer and some other things that I will close with after Amy's presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'll try to be brief with my comments on Forward 2045. But to just start, for those who may be watching or in the audience who don't know what Forward 2045 is, it is our comprehensive plan that we're working on currently. A comprehensive plan is a guide to future growth and development. It's very generalized, very high level, but it sets sort of the foundation for things to come in terms of area plans, land use recommendations, rezoning requests, subdivisions, infrastructure expansions, things of that nature. So where are we at in the process? We have completed our outreach, our main outreach, and we've reviewed the input that we've received so far. So we've done all that. We are currently drafting goals and recommendations and hope to have the draft plan out for review this summer, probably July, August timeframe, with going forward with adoption fall 24 to winter 25 in that time frame. Hopefully looking at November, December time frame, but you know, little leeway there in case things get pushed back to some of the timing aspects. So a quick discussion about our outreach that we've done as part of this process. We did have an online survey. You can see the figures right there. We had over 2,900 survey participants with just shy of 117,000 data points and over 4,000 written comments as part of that survey alone. Just from a statistical sort of framework, that figure based off of Forsyth County population leads to a 1.8% margin of error and a 95% level of confidence statistically. So it's very statistically relevant by the number of participants that we had. We also had a website, and the recent estimates on site sessions or people coming to the website is about 8,500. We had 16 public input meetings, both started in the fall and also in early spring. We had 230 participants there, and we held 9 stakeholder meetings over 8 concepts or topic areas with 72 participants. Other outreach efforts that we've done targeted outreach using Meta, which is basically Facebook and Twitter, Google, Spectrum TV, and then 3 radio stations with ads playing. And that led to over 1 million impressions, which, if you don't know what an impression is basically at least 1 million people saw the ad at some point, saw it or heard it, so they were informed about the process. We attended 16 community events where we had a table out so folks could either get contact information so we could send them information about upcoming meetings or give them links to the survey. We spoke to 14 boards and commissions. This is our public boards and commissions that are appointed by y'all and the City Council. We had presentations to 10 private or nonprofit organizations. We did presentations in a group exercise with 3 teen groups over the last summer, and we also did a children's booklet to try to get the children involved, just kind of thinking about their city and our community, and also thereby giving the parents an access to the survey and informed about the survey in the process. All of our public input that we have received through every aspect is available on our website, for2045.com. So there is a link at the top, a little tab that says public input. You can go there and you can see every single one of the survey results, all the results from the input meetings that we had, the written comments, boards and commissions, stakeholder meetings, everything that we've heard is available on that website, just to be transparent about what we're hearing from the public. So to go in through, I'm going to go very briefly over what we heard in the survey, because this will tie into what our growth management discussion, which we'll have shortly. The first question we asked folks is what's most important to them, and we asked them to rank them and their top 5. And this was the average ranking as part of that first sort of question on the survey, with housing being number 1 and economic development being number 2. Equity, then livability, then environmental sustainability. And that's how, from an average ranking standpoint, things played out. And just looking at some of the more detailed questions we asked about different topics, regarding economic development, the top elements for good economic development were to support local businesses, reuse of existing commercial and industrial areas, and then just more amenities to make us more attractive to businesses and professionals. For quality of life, the number 1 response was sense of safety, green space and natural areas, and then a strong economy and job opportunities. Environmental sustainability, water quality was the number 1 issue, followed by land and wildlife preservation, and then air quality. In terms of adaptability and resiliency, number 1 response was reuse and redevelopment of underutilized sites, followed by preservation of land and natural habitats, and embracing new technology as it becomes available. You'll start to see a lot of themes sort of keep repeating themselves on multiple aspects, and that's one of the things we'll talk about in a minute. In terms of community appearance, trees and vegetation was the number 1 most important element, followed by reuse of existing underutilized or vacant buildings, and then the preservation of our historic buildings and neighborhoods. So what we heard through that is that we basically have 3 competing interests for our remaining land. And sort of to set the stage, Forsyth County is number 4 out of 100 North Carolina counties in population, but we are number 60 in size, and we are growing. So, and we're approximately about 75% built out. So that leaves about 25% of sort of undeveloped land out there to be used in some capacity. When we went out to the public, we posed them a question saying, we've heard 3 competing interests: land preservation, housing, and economic development. How would you rank those in terms of importance when looking at the remaining 25%? Because how you rank those will determine how you sort of address the other 2. And when we put that out to the public, the ranking you see there, number 1, land preservation, 2, housing, 3, economic development, job creation, that is how the public ranked them. The sort of the democratic process of dots came out is that land preservation was our number 1 critical interest. So how does that play out in terms of growth management? Some of you may recognize this. This is the current growth management plan, a Legacy 2030 update, which is our current comprehensive plan. The yellow blossoms, asterisks, whatever you want to call them, those show activity center locations. But what the critical thing you want to look at is the different rings in their colors. The dark pink is growth management area 1. That's our downtown or town centers. The sort of lighter pink, salmon color, that is our GMA2, which is urban neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods built prior to 1950. The yellow beigey color is GMA3, which is our suburban neighborhoods, which are typically built with single-family neighborhoods with an RS9 zoning, which is 9,000 square foot lots, or about 4.84 dwelling units per acre. And then we look at the lighter green. Those are sort of proposed areas, GMA4 proposed areas for expansion. And then GMA5, those are our rural areas where we would not recommend expanding sewer or water outwards. You saw this in our earlier briefing with Courtney's presentation, so I'll talk a little bit more about this. It's kind of hard to see the rings, but one thing I wanted to point out here is that in the beige color, the brown lines are sewer lines. But in the beige sort of coloring of GMA3, you see that there's some areas that are still available for expansion of sewer that'll be gravity fed. You can, I don't know if you can really tell, but we had the three sort of areas that Courtney mentioned in her presentation that are sort of current projects, the one out in Louisville, the Tanglewood area, and then the one here on Wahlberg. And then she talked about the sort of 6 areas here that are in GMA5 that sort of address the Beltway, because in addition to our normal growth, the Beltway has opened, and that has completely changed development and development pressure up in these areas. So we have this area here, which would not require a lift station. They could probably do through gravity fed. And then you have the 4 sort of basins up here with the little yellow stars indicating a lift station. And that's along the existing portion where the Beltway has already been developed and opened. And then you have these 2 areas over here, sort of where the western section of the Beltway would come through and could be potentially developed out there. And so we took the information that we heard from the public about land preservation being number 1, but also recognizing that we need housing and we need jobs, as well as recognizing the Beltway changes, the sort of current conditions. And this is our draft approach to growth management. And I will stress that this is a draft. And what we're looking at here is showing the 3 areas. You got Tanglewood, Louisville, and then the Wahlberg area here as GMA3, because we know those are current sewer projects. This area down here in the southwest, sort of southern portion of the county, this area was actually shown as GMA3 in the original Legacy document adopted in 2001. As part of the Legacy 2030 update, it was changed to GMA4. We're changing it back to GMA3. And as far as the other areas up here around the Beltway, there was those 6 potential areas that we could expand with gravity and a lift station. The only one we're recommending a change to is this one here around Germantown Road. We feel that that area provides the best option for future expansion. It serves the most area, it's the best direct access to the Beltway, and we also have this area here that was already GMA4. It would remain GMA4 as potential. When looking at prioritizing sewer expansion, our recommendation would be utilize the remaining portions of GMA3 in those current expansion projects. Make sure we have done everything in GMA3 first before we move out and do any more expansion. Then followed it by looking at here the expansion along this area of the Beltway before we ever go out to anything in GMA5. And if we ever did, it would be along areas that are closer in along that Beltway, because you're closer into the more urban, more developed areas that already have, not only would sewer be expanded, but also the road network is in place, the schools are in place, there's different infrastructure and amenities are already currently there that can serve and handle that population. And then Chris is going to talk a little bit more about this, but just to give you an idea of how this all works out with the proposal that King has on the table, the area out here in purple, that would be that sewer expansion area. So it is basically very much away from the areas that we would ever recommend expanding sewer out to, particularly here along the Yadkin River. And just to go back to this, the information that we heard from the public, thinking about environmental sustainability, water quality was number 1. So obviously protecting the Yadkin River as much as we possibly can from development pressure would be very beneficial to achieving that. And with that, I will answer any questions you have about the Forward 2045 process, and then Chris will take over the rest of the presentation.
Any questions? After digesting, we may have a few more, but
Oh, that's fine, that's fine.
But thank you.
Yeah, but I do encourage everyone, y'all and the public, to take a look at the website. There is a tremendous amount of information on the website concerning public input. but also just community history. If you don't know about our community history and sort of the development of our community, there's some information on that as well that's really informative for folks. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. And just to tout Amy a little bit, Amy, if you do go to that website, Amy built that website. It is very good, very informative, and she taught herself through trial and error how to do that. Something I wouldn't do. We will get back to the GMA and King Sewer discussion, but I did want to point out, just go over a couple other things. We handled UDO CC 25 at your meeting last week. We do have another text amendment that will be coming to you over the next several months. It's UDO CC 26. I believe several folks had reached out to some of the commissioners following some changes to the general statutes that dealt with some increases in the number of children allowed within daycares. And they also reached out to some of the city council members as a result. We looked at ways to modify the existing child daycare and adult daycare standards within our ordinance, addressing both the increases that the state incorporated into their regulations, but also looking at it more holistically. We did increase the number of children allowed in residential daycare settings to match the North Carolina General Statute allowances. We did look at expanding the non-residential districts that allow child daycare centers to all non-residential districts except general industrial, and there are even some exceptions to that. You can have a daycare if you have an industry that's in GI, if it's accessory to your use, but we don't really want someone to go open a daycare beside of an industrial facility. This proposed text amendment does look at consolidating both the child daycare small home and the child daycare large home into a single use entitled child daycare home. That's consistent with most of our peers locally. They only have one category. We also did look at simplifying the approval process for all categories of both child daycare and adult daycare uses. So that information will be coming to you over the next several months. Just looking at development trends real quickly, single-family residential continues to outpace just about year over year. The first quarter for 2024 is that on the top line, that middle column, we did between single-family and multifamily, we did $121 million worth of permitted value in the first quarter of this year. Commercial, slightly down over 23 and 22, but if you look at it, it is in line with where we were in both 2020 and 2021. So it's not a drastic decrease. There were actually, I believe in 2023, both the Novant and Atrium Health projects permits were issued in the first quarter of that year, which I believe highlights the institutional new development projects that were in that year. The first quarter of that year. And the other items on there, again, just kind of highlights the various breakdowns of the number of residential permits we've issued year over the last 5 years, and it also looks at this particular quarter amongst the constructed value. And again, single family and multifamily probably accounts for about 60% of the total value of permits issued, but still overall we've issued over $250,000 of constructed value in the first quarter of this year. That does bring me, and kind of to tie all of the discussions we've had today up a little bit, at least from the utility and planning perspective, getting back to the King proposal. Again, you see the area that Amy alluded to earlier, outlined in purple, which is the proposal that King has, which is shown on our current growth management area plan. And then also what it looks like on the proposed growth management plan. And, we wanted to, I know there have been some discussions between the manager's office and utilities and planning on this. And it's my understanding that the manager's office has provided some information to the board on this, but did want to make sure that the board is aware of this proposal. If it were to go forward, and I'll lead perhaps whether it can, perhaps up to the manager and the attorney if they want to weigh in on that. But it does based on the current annexation statutes, the city of King cannot annex the area where they're proposing to utilize this ARPA money for this sewer expansion. So as a result of that, what that would do is it would perhaps thrust a policy decision onto this board that you have not asked for, because it is a utility expansion within our county that if someone were to come in and want to intensify development in an area we haven't identified for future growth, they would be bringing rezoning requests to you for intensification. And again, it's not anything that we have contemplated, asked for, or even thought about. The other thing I will mention is this did come to our attention as a result of a longtime engineering employee who actually lives in the area, and the city of King had reached out to inquire about acquiring an easement over his property, and he reached out to the deputy director, Kirk Erickson, and wanted to know what was going on and what did we know about this, and at that point, we knew nothing. And that was the middle of March, and since that time, we have had some internal meetings between planning staff and utility staff. Some of planning and utility staff met with the city of King a couple weeks ago, and then after that meeting, Courtney and I sat down with the manager's office just to bring them up to speed on what we knew. So with that, I'm open to any questions. I don't think, well, this is what the City of King sewer project looks like. It involves a lift station, it involves a force main, and it involves gravity sewer. And again, it's my understanding that this is being funded through some ARPA money. So as we alluded to earlier with Courtney's presentation, obviously it's a timing issue, so I think they have to have these funds expended by the end of 2026 if this is something that they want to do. But again, just bringing it to your attention, I'm sure there will be ongoing discussions.
Well, just simply, go ahead. Just simply point out that not only did you all not know anything about it, neither did the manager nor the county commissioners. It was never brought to our attention that King intended to do this.
I have one question, and this has not come, this particular number has not come out, but in terms of what the city of King was envisioning with their ARPA project, was it only the study, or was it envisioning actually installing the sewer line?
It's my understanding it would be part of installing the sewer line, the lift station, and the force main.
To cover everything?
Correct.
Wow.
My question was the proposal or thought that it would maybe hook to the city-county lines, or going on to the river and having a small plant?
Well, it will, the way it is currently proposed, it will hook on and flow into the city-county utility treatment system. There was an earlier proposal with the same money for them to construct their own plant. The manager may can weigh in a little bit on this. My understanding, though, that since the Yadkin PD River basin is there are already some issues with nutrient loads in that basin, that the state would not authorize the construction of this without taking away city-county utility capacity at our plant, and the city-county utility said no. So that, it's my understanding, kind of killed putting in their own plant. So their backup position is to spend these funds, again, not within anything that the city of King can currently annex without changing the statutes, expend these funds in an area and then put the policy decision for land use decisions on this board, but then put the effluent back into the city-county system for treatment.
There were a couple more. The water line that King got the water pump station down at Donahaw on the Yadkin, and that line comes and supplies King. Do you know whether any of that, or it comes through part of Forsyth County, whether any of that, whether the part it's in Forsyth County, whether or not it serves any Forsyth County residents.
This is the unfortunate part of having this, the morning session bifurcated because Courtney's not here. I could turn to her. It's my understanding, to answer your question, yes, I'm not sure at this point that the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utilities understands the extent of that. I'm not sure that they actually have permission to be serving anyone within Forsyth County either. But again, those are questions that go beyond me from a planning perspective into some policy issues with utilities and acquisition of such within this county, which is also a legal question. But it's my understanding that not only do they pump water from their intake at Donahaw back up to King, but they are serving some folks both in Tobacconville and in the unincorporated areas around that intake and mainline.
Well, part of the, you've opened up not intentionally, but there's a lot of questions here to be answered. I run into someone at the agriculture office probably about March, and they were asking me about it. I don't know when it had surfaced, and somebody lived in near the Tobacconville area, and they indicated that at that time there were some tree cutters that was working in a.
It's my understanding they cut some of it.
Well, I
They
found
perhaps could have cut some property on our Rolling Hills property, but that's a discussion for another day too.
well, there ended up. I found that out too. They did that, and or somebody did, but they had. Attempted or was getting ready to go on some private, well, that was private property, it's county property, but nevertheless, it was some more nearby, a farm, private property, and they was attempting to go there, and the owner told them they couldn't do that, and I just told the person I did not know a thing about it, and a little while later, I talked to the manager, but I won't keep on going about it. But there's a lot of questions here because you mentioned about if a line did exist, brings zoning into play, brings into play. You got, I guess, there's some GMA 5 area in Forsyth County there that could open up for.
By our current comprehensive plan, if that sewer goes in, it actually becomes GMA 3, which is appropriate for 0 to 8 units per acre. And, again, that's what our comprehensive plan says. But again, that's envisioned to be something that we're working in tandem with utilities on or someone who has come to us about a development, not someone who's bringing a development to us that we haven't contemplated. So you're exactly right. It brings up a lot of questions, but again, from Courtney and I, once we kind of got our hands around a little bit, that's when we felt like we needed to come to the county manager's office to, make sure that they understood what was going on again, because it does lead to a lot of larger issue policy discussions that this board is going to,
I'll just end my question with this, asking the manager to do something, is to keep the board informed, because there's a lot of questions here that needs to be answered, and to let King, I'm not sure how you do it. There's just a lot of questions to be answered, and we need, the county needs to know the answers.
So Chantel and I have a meeting with the manager of King next Wednesday, and so we'll certainly do that. I do want to be real clear that I think the manager's office and the Utilities Commission, we've all known for a long time that Clemens was working on a project to build a wastewater treatment plant roughly at that location. And
King.
King. Who did I say?
Clemens.
Okay. King. All right. I don't know. Too many municipalities may have. So we've known that's been underway for a long, long time, and it's been at different parts of that process. And then we also knew that ultimately the Utility Commission entered an agreement with King to accept that effluent. What we didn't know is that there was still a plan to essentially convert, I presume this is what it is, essentially convert a wastewater treatment plant to a lift station and still serve that area. So that's what we didn't know, but I've known for a long time that they were working towards a sewer solution for the town. Kind of thought it went away when the interconnect agreement came in. So, but we'll meet next week and make sure that you know as much as we know. So.
Good.
And I'll just weigh in, Mr. Chairman, that I've just learned of this situation, and to the extent that King needs to acquire any new property interest within Forsyth County outside of the city limits of King, they would need to bring that before you, the Board of Commissioners, for your approval. They did that 10 years ago when they were building a water line, 2014, so they know the process. I think I've heard they may be approaching citizens within Forsyth County to acquire easements, and that can't be done if they're new easements until this Board of Commissioners has blessed that.
Just for the public's information, I can confirm, because I received a contact from a constituent also in mid-March, indicating that he had been approached by the city manager of King asking for, got a letter asking for an easement across his property. He checked, and it would also have run across the new county park land up there. He talked with them, and they didn't know anything about it. I forwarded the inquiry to City County Utilities Director. She didn't know anything about it, and so that's been a unusual process. Could we have, from your great map maker there, could we also have a map with with an overlay of the municipal boundaries that are relevant here, the King boundary inside Forsyth County and the Tobaccoville boundary? Because I think it's informative to see where the proposed expansion service area is in connection with the placement of the municipalities. So
And it's actually on this map. You just have to know where to look, and it's not color coded, but the
I would need to have it color coded.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Chris?
Okay.
There'll be more forthcoming on that. Thank you very much. Good. Next, in terms, we have a couple more discussion items. And the first one, we're going to have an update about Fitch rating system changes. And we have David Cheatwood from First Tryon Advisors, and you may have brought some other folks with you. Thanks for coming up, and we thought it'd be better to just have a public review of this and sort of get it out there. Thank you.
Pull up my screen here. Great. All right. Commissioners, Ms. Watts, good afternoon. Thanks very much for having me here today. My name is David Cheatwood. I work at a firm called First Tryon Advisors. We are based in Charlotte. We serve as financial advisor to cities, towns, counties, utility systems, universities across the Carolinas and other states as well. I have my colleague Chazo Habliston here with me as well. We have served as the county's financial advisor for about 2 years. In our role as financial advisor, we help the county and our other clients with long-term financial planning and then just the debt issuance process. So we worked with the county most recently, exactly a year ago, on the issuance of your 2023 general obligation bonds. So again, thank you very much for having me here today. Sorry, I'm here to talk about a credit rating downgrade, but the manager's office and the finance department asked me to come just to give you an overview of that process, how that went down, and kind of the steps going forward, options you all may have with regard to Fitch credit ratings. And so I prepared a presentation here. I think you have it in front of you as well. It is very in-depth. I was going to start just at a higher level, but happy to get into the weeds with y'all on this and answer any questions you have. But I will start going through it really just by starting with an overview of the history of the county's credit ratings and kind of where you stand today. So the county has issued general obligation bonds and limited obligation bonds over the years, and you all currently maintain credit ratings from the three main credit rating agencies. Those are Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. The county has been rated AAA by all three agencies. We look back a long time, for at least 25 years, y'all have been AAA by all three. Now, I'll start by saying you don't have to be rated by all three agencies. In fact, if you look across the country and even within North Carolina, a lot of entities are just rated by one or two of these. Typically, the bigger entities that maybe have more debt outstanding are just larger entities. Your peers across the state, Mecklenburg, Wake, Guilford, they have 3 credit ratings. So again, you see it typically with the larger entities, but there's no requirement to have 3 credit ratings. In addition, when you look at the 3 agencies out there, if you took a poll of the underwriters and salespeople that sell your bonds, the investors that buy your bonds, the mutual funds, the insurance companies, they would typically rank Fitch as the 3rd of 3 in terms of the value and importance they put on that credit rating. And so they are, again, generally viewed. They may refute that, but the 3rd of the 3 in that regard. So you were last formally rated by all 3 agencies, including Fitch, a year ago in connection with your 2023 general obligation bonds. Your AAA credit rating was affirmed by all 3 agencies. As a part of the Fitch rating process, there was no indication of any downgrade. Your rating report at the time was viewed very positively, written very positively. These rating reports always note things that say if factors that can make you subject to a downgrade. Nothing that they listed has occurred. And so really my big takeaway from this and what I wanted to relay to the board here is you all were downgraded by Fitch from AAA to AA+, one notch, purely as a result of a change in their criteria or methodology. And so all 3 agencies have a particular identified, it's published out there, set of criteria. It's the factors that they use to rate every entity, the weighting they assign to each factor. And so they all have that. And it is typical for rating agencies to review their own criteria, and they may change it from time to time. Moody's changed their criteria about 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago. There's no change in the county's credit rating as a result of that. S&P last changed theirs about 10 years ago, and then this is the first Fitch change in a while. So again, it's not unusual for criteria changes. They refresh it every now and again. But with the changes in what Fitch did, and I'll walk through each of those and how they impacted the county, when they released this new rating criteria in April, so just last month, as a part of that release in terms of the new factors and the weighting they were assigning to each factor, they also released what they called an under criteria observation. It was a list of about 500 entities across the country that, based purely on the new criteria, were under observation for either a rating upgrade or a downgrade. I think most of those are probably on the downgrade side, but again, about 550 entities across the country. I'll get into this, but there was 10 in the state of North Carolina on that list. So Fitch's plan when they released that last month was they were going to review all of those entities on that list within the next 6 months. This seemed like an inevitable process, but the county was actually one of the first ones they reviewed on that UCO list. And that's a function of the fact that they last reviewed you a year ago, and internally Fitch has a 1-year deadline for them to review credits, typically the larger credits. And so you were coming up on a review anyway. And with this new criteria, they reviewed you under the new criteria. So y'all were one of the first. And so when we talk about some of your peers across the state that are also on this list, they have not been reviewed yet. Y'all were, again, unfortunately, the first out of the gate here. So with that action they took, you'll see at the top right chart there, again, they all follow a very similar format here. You maintained your AAA from Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Your limited obligation bonds are rated one notch below because you're not pledging your taxing power, you're pledging the asset you're financing. So that's very typical, but you went from the AAA down one notch to a AA+ from Fitch. So what changed or a little bit more background. Again, I mentioned April, they released this new methodology, the UCO, the under criteria observation list, listed 550 entities. 10 of them were in North Carolina. You'll see some of your peers and some other entities in this area on that list there. That's not a coincidence. When we go through the new factors, some of the factors are the local economy and demographic factors, and so those entities that are close in proximity to you were grading out along those factors along the same line there. So as a part of this new criteria, Fitch uses a model. They don't call it like a rating scorecard, but it is a model where there's various inputs, and you get assigned a score out of that model. They call it a metric profile score. That score can range anywhere from 1 at the lowest, where you're right bumping up against non-investment grade, to 10 at the highest. If you are 10 or higher by this metric profile, then you are AAA in Fitch's eyes. If you are between 9 and 10, you are a AA+, that one notch lower. And so from the county's perspective, you all graded out at a 9.37, so you were pretty close to the middle of that AA+ range. What Fitch relayed is that they are predominantly looking at that metric profile score. There's a couple notching factors that they can take into consideration. I'll highlight those to you, but none of them applied in the county's case. And they leave very little wiggle room, very little subjectivity in their action there. They've basically said if it is a marginal difference or marginally close, then they may take that into account. But with a score in the 9.4 of the range of 9 to 10, you all, in their eyes, were under their new criteria in the AA+ category. I mentioned here just a quick overview of the prior rating criteria that the county and everyone was graded out under. You'll see, again, it's pretty high level. They're looking at your revenue framework, your expenditure framework, long-term liability, that's your debt and pensions, and then your operating performance. You don't see a specific box in there on local economy and demographics. They do take that into account a little bit in that scenario analysis box below it. But the biggest thing, and I think this is one of the reasons why Fitch revised their criteria, unlike Moody's and Standard & Poor's, where we can go in and replicate their scorecard, their model, and be able to input your data and show where you score out, Fitch historically has been very much a black box. We had a feeling for what factors they were looking at. We didn't know the weighting, but we couldn't replicate it. And I think Fitch, over time, heard that. They knew the other two rating agencies were more clear-cut on how they rated. So I think that played into the revision to their criteria, because you'll see in a little bit, they now have specific factors and specific weighting tied to each factor. But historically, it was a little bit more of a black box. Again, as I noted, y'all graded out at the AAA level. The last rating report, there was no signs. You were not on negative outlook. There was no signs of a downgrade there. So the new criteria here, you'll see it's three main boxes, three main categories: financials, demographic and economic strength, and long-term liability. Again, that being your debt and pension liability. The largest weighting is that middle box, that demographic and economic strength at 44%, your financial profile at 35%, long-term liability 21%. There are different factors, sub-factors under each of those categories, the key rating drivers that they call them, and weighting assigned to each of those. Have a little bit of detail in this presentation on how you grade out on each of those, but in sum, your financial profile graded out at a AAA level. And we like to categorize these different factors on things that you all as a board and your management staff have direct control over, or pretty direct control over, versus things you really don't. Financials is one that you all for the policies you set and the decisions you make, you really do have a good amount of control over your financial profile, and you're getting the highest scores from that metric. So again, y'all have got control over that. You're getting the highest scores. From the long-term liability burden, your debt and your pension, your scores are pretty good, not the highest, but good. When I talk about how that rates out, it's versus your peers across the entire country, the entire Fitch rated portfolio there. The one that was not as strong was that middle box, that demographic and economic strength. A few factors there. That's something that, again, you as a board don't have direct control over. Yes, from a longer-term view, if you bring in certain companies and they increase wages, that can add to that. But again, from a day-to-day governance perspective, you don't have control over your population trend, your unemployment rate, your median household income, economic concentration, et cetera. So I wanted to point out those different buckets there and the things that you all are grading out at a high level. Again, financials very strong, long-term liability good. And we'll go through these. There are some additional analytical factors, notching factors that come into play. So they'll grade you out, whatever the metric profile says, but then they will look for some other below the line potential adjustments. We looked through those. We were hoping to find one that really applied and that Fitch would agree. But as you look through these, they're really not any that apply to the county's situation here. There were some on the financial side, and there's really only a couple in each of these that are positive adjustment factors. There's more that are negative adjustment factors. That fiscal oversight, that's really if you are in bad shape, but you're making good headway to correct that. I will note revenue capacity under there. If you have a really high market value per capita, then that can be a positive notching factor, but you have to be over $300,000 in terms of market value or assessed value per capita. The county is closer to about $115,000 on that. So that was one that could apply to some entities, did not apply in the county's case. When you look at the economic and demographic additional factors, that first one is one that is the only positive one in this group that could apply, economic and institutional strength. They look at it, there's a GDP calculation, but also presence of a longstanding institutional anchor. These are their words, not ours, but if you're where the state capital is or other large institutional presence that is driving the economy and where your MSA or your regional economic center of employment is greater than 400,000. Based on what we could find, I think that employment is more around 200,000. So again, that one did not apply. And there's a couple under the long-term liability. Again, nothing applied in the county's case here. So your score and your ultimate credit rating was driven entirely by that metric profile scorecard. Just to give you a little bit more, so this, the county was downgraded last Thursday, and as a part of that, they released they had a press release that I believe was provided to the board there. And they note on there, as I mentioned, certain things that can upgrade the county, certain things that can downgrade the county going forward. So a roadmap to go up or down. And if you look at the upgrade factors, so how do I get back up to a AAA under this new criteria? You know, the first is a pretty significant decrease in your debt or pensions without a corresponding decrease in personal income. The second, and this is the one that I think, again, going forward, demographic economic strength, an increase in certain of those metrics. Also, from a downgrade perspective, I do not, again, squarely in that AA plus now in their eyes, and so you're not at risk of a further downgrade here. But if your financial, your fund balance specifically were to decrease further, certain economic or demographic metrics declined, or there was a significant increase in your debt. But those are the things that they noted in their press release. Probably not going to be able to see this very well, but this is a snapshot of your metric profile and your score. And I'll just reiterate a couple of the points that I made earlier there. This top part is your financial profile, and that is really focused on fund balance, your revenue trends, how much control do you have over expenditures. You know, in some states where they have unions and collective bargaining, they don't have as much control over your expenditures. That's not the case here. You all don't have, I know there's a very high cap on property tax rate, but in their eyes, you can increase revenues as much as you need to as well. So you all graded out, if you look at the far right, for this 35% category, again, financially, a AAA for that metric. So incredibly strong financially. The economics and demographics there in the middle, you'll see some mid-range scores there, and that's driven by population trends, unemployment, again, looking at how you compare to national statistics and your peers, the other peers that they rate. The population with a bachelor's degree or higher, your median household income. Those are some of the factors they take into account. And again, the scoring is good. It's mid-range. It's not, but if we're nitpicking, that's something that is less than the AAA standard. From a long-term liability standpoint, again, it's debt and pension liability, and so you grade out also in the mid-range there, but a little bit higher mid-range than the economic and demographic profile. So from a total score, again, you're right in the middle of this AA plus range, no adjustment factors there. So to wrap up, and I'm happy to answer any questions, again, reiterate, the county did nothing wrong in this case. In fact, all your trends are very positive financially, economically. You look at all your trend lines, they are really positive. And it's really, just to use the metaphor, Fitch moved the goalpost on you, and that's something that happens from time to time. And so with that, what are your options going forward? First, you'll have outstanding debt. Does the AA plus, does the downgraded AA plus change anything on the interest rates on your outstanding debt? The answer is no. All of that is fixed rate debt. You're locked in, your interest rates, your debt service does not change as a result of that. Your next potential bond issue would be next spring, if y'all decide to move forward with another GO bond under your 2/3 capacity like you've done in the past. And so you've got some time before you go back into the market. So you don't have to rush to make any sort of decision here today. You have no obligation to continue to use Fitch to rate your bonds. Now, for the outstanding debt that you have, they have an obligation to continue to rate that. They have an obligation to the bondholders, the public, to keep rating the outstanding debt that they already rate. And so they'll continue to reach out to the finance department on an annual basis, get some information, update their credit rating, unless the county tells them to withdraw your credit rating altogether, and that's one of the options here. But they will do that. You're not paying them to do that. That's just something they would do on their own. And so going forward, if we fast forward to this time next year, you've got your next bond issue. What do? 3 options. One, you can maintain your Fitch rating and ask Fitch to rate your 2025 bonds again. That is an option. You would pay them to rate those bonds. The second option would be to keep your Fitch rating on the outstanding debt, but when you go to market again, just don't ask them to rate that series of bonds. They'll still rate your outstanding debt, but not the future ones. Or, as I mentioned, you can tell Fitch, withdraw the county's credit rating altogether, take it out. I'm sure it's in the system that they, your last rating action was a AA plus, but going forward, they're not going to reach out to finance staff for any sort of surveillance. They've withdrawn the credit rating, and that's okay to do. I will tell you, if you went out today and sold your bonds, a series of general obligation bonds, there's no difference from a AAA to a AAA, AA plus. It's hard to prove that exactly, but if you talk to the different underwriters who are out there buying your bonds and the investors, it's such a negligible difference. And again, with Fitch being the third of 3 in terms of value and importance that investors put on that, I don't think there'd be any difference on your interest rate there. If so, it would be incredibly negligible difference. If you went out and just didn't get a Fitch credit rating, again, you've got the 2 AAAs. That works great. You don't need 3 ratings to sell your bonds. Investors are good with 2 ratings. Or if you withdrew your rating, that's not a negative implication going forward either for the county. So you all could say, just take it away. You go out and sell your bonds next year. You're not going to get dinged because you took the Fitch rating away. So all of these options are at your disposal. Talked a little bit about with the manager's office and finance department about those options. in our view as your advisor here, I would not do option one. I would not pay Fitch to rate you lower than the other ones are rating you going forward. And so I think then the decision is, do you keep it out there for the outstanding debt, or do you just withdraw it altogether? Again, not a decision you have to make today, because you're not going to market for a little while, but those are two options you have. So I know pretty high level, a lot of detail in here, but happy to answer any questions you have about the process, the factors that they use, or anything you have.
Just one question, please. How do the other two agencies compare in terms of the amount of weight put on demographic factors that are outside of the jurisdiction, outside of the rated body's control?
So I'll lean on my colleague Chezo back there as well. Chezo, I think it's closer, while this is 44%, I think those are more in the 30% range, 30 to 35% from a local economy demographic standpoint with the other two. There may be slight differences, but they are not as heavily weighted as the new Fitch criteria.
I have two questions. One, I just want to reiterate the issue that if we chose your option two, for example, don't rate the new bonds, but continue to rate the outstanding, they're doing that on their nickel. We're not paying them to continue rating.
That's right.
So what it would demonstrate to anybody else, we're not afraid to be rated. It's just that we're not going to pay you to do this now that you've made this adjustment. And,
right.
And as you say, it wouldn't make any difference if we did. Yeah, why pay them to get something that is conceivably going to be less? I agree. The second question is a little more wrapped into this methodology. And if this is way into the weeds, just say, we have that later. But basically, I am pretty familiar generally with kind of what regression analysis does. And it is done for the purpose of prediction. And weighting comes from the analysis itself. It doesn't come from assigning weights.
Right.
And I could see that methodology being distinguishing them in some regard, and it takes away some, because you're really looking at, here's this whole line of communities that meet a certain sort of profile, the size, or probably a finance, and I guess that's maybe where their weights are coming in. But I'm trying to decide what they're trying to predict. They're trying to predict stability and how is stability measured. And I'm just trying to figure out in a broad sense, what were they trying to do here? What was their model doing?
So the model, and I will say for the other two agencies, as I mentioned, we can recreate their model and
Right.
we can set it up and run it. While they give us access on their website to input certain things, we don't see what's going on behind the scenes there with that regression analysis. So we don't know everything. We know the inputs, but we don't know what's going on behind the scene in terms of what the output ultimately comes out at. But what are they trying to do with this? I mean, one, while they do, I'm sure, internally set certain metrics, if you get to this level, it's a AAA for this factor. They're also comparing you to your peers, and I think that's a little bit what's going on behind the scenes. How do they rate all the other entities, and how do you stack up against those? But to take those different boxes individually here on the financial side, again, they're focused on what is your fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures? What's that fund balance been over time? How much control do you have over revenues and expenditures? The demographic, I think the key ones there is they are looking at certain things from the unemployment, yes, but the population, the median household income as of their portfolio median. So they're looking at everyone else they rate and how you grade out in that. And they're trying to get a feel for, oftentimes they look at it in a worst case view. What happens if recession, this goes down? How well can the county weather the storm? Are they concentrated? Do they have high income levels where people can keep paying their property taxes? And so a lot of that is just driven to how well you can withstand an economic recession. And then on the long-term liability side, it's looking at not just the amount that you have, but how does that compare to your revenues and expenditures? How much is your debt service every year a total of your total expenditures, or a percentage of your total expenditures? How much is your total debt a percentage of the income level in the county to try to help them think about affordability of this debt. And so a lot of factors in there. I don't know if I directly answered your question, but we can't tell exactly what's going on when the model is running and calculating like we can with the other two. We see the inputs and the weighting that comes out with that.
All those things you said make perfectly good sense. In terms of things that would be of value in terms of deciding, how the likelihood that this bond is going to be repaid.
Right.
And the assurances among relative comparisons of other communities and the factors that they're looking at. But, I'm going to drop the issue of because I don't see, the regression analysis predicts something. And in this case, it's going to be a distribution of numbers, and maybe they apply that and come up with a rating of 10 points. But the distribution of numbers have to mean something.
Right.
Usually, there's an outcome, and I guess you could say an outcome is, it's not all of those things. It has to be a single outcome that these variables are predicting. And if it's simply default or no default, that's not going to tell you much. I mean, just from the numbers, it won't help you very much. It's wasting our time. I apologize for wasting your time.
Not at all. It's a good question, and it's one where when we see, when we first heard about the potential rating criteria change, which was late last year, they always put out a release or a request for comment. Here's what we're thinking of doing, industry comment on it. And so the initial reaction was like, oh, this is good because Fitch has always been that black box, hard to know what they're taking into account. They're going to go more to a scorecard factor. But then when this now comes out, while they are more transparent on what they're doing, we're still not seeing some of what's going on
You can't
behind the
recreate
scenes there. Right.
Because you can't run that regression
That's right.
analysis because you don't know.
That's right.
I got it. No, this has been very helpful, and I think you make a very strong recommendation for the future.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We have actually one other discussion item. It's entitled Community Grants, and I believe our County Manager, Dudley Watts, is going to talk about that a little bit.
I think Aisha Carter is going to come up. Aisha, is this you? Yeah, so this is really part of the budget process that we're into, and we've brought parts of it to you over time. And so I think last week we gave you the binder that had what we're calling community grants, really kind of special appropriations moving forward. And so Aisha has put that information out to you. It's really more just, do you have any questions than anything else? But I'll turn it over to Aisha just so you know what you've got. And, obviously this will all sort of meld into the budget process as we move forward. So.
Good afternoon, County Commissioners. Hi. Hope you're all doing well. Here to give a special appropriations update for fiscal year 2025. Like Dudley had stated, you received a binder last week with a couple documents in it. The binders included all special appropriation requests, this PowerPoint that I'll be presenting, as well as a legal sheet summing up the request for fiscal year 2025 and comparing the fiscal year 2024 governmental funding by agency. So I'll start with notable dates, just a reminder of some notable dates. Fiscal year 25 application period was January 29th through February 26th. There will be a public hearing June 10th at 2 p.m. on a proposed budget. And all of the individuals who submitted requests for special appropriations have been notified about that date.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
Yeah, and the only reason I am is that we've had a number of requests and had some informal conversations about changing that hearing to 6 p.m.
Okay.
And we don't have to take action, but I thought, since this is on your list, I was going to wait actually until the end of this meeting. But I'm assuming that's probably okay with everyone for the 6 p.m.
That's what we did last year.
Yeah, we did that last year, and it doesn't require action, but since it jumped out at me to 2 p.m. since we have talked about 6 p.m.
Perfect.
So,
I'll update it and let them know.
good, thank you.
So before you move forward, also, I think that what was sent from citizens was also a consideration for when we do the adoption of the budget, that be a 6 p.m. meeting too. I know that we have to vote on all of that, but I wanted to bring that to the attention of the commissioners. I know that we did not do that last year, but there is a lot of interest based on emails we received, and I wanted to be responsive to those emails and make note of that right now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, we can continue that discussion piece at the very end, but
Yeah.
you're ready to go.
Perfect.
Thanks.
All right, and then I got June 6th through June 27th. That's the historical time for the possible adoption of the budget ordinance. And then for those who all are approved for funding, it will run from July 1st through June 30th, which is our fiscal year. So I mentioned this during our last update, but this is just a year-to-year comparison showing that in fiscal year 2024, there were 35 applications submitted, and in fiscal year 2025, 50 was submitted. So there was an increase of 15, and that was due to increased communications efforts. Interesting, there was an actual decrease in requests. I'll show a list of all of those applications that were submitted, and they are listed in alphabetical order. So we got A through E here. E through M. M through S. And then T through Y, totaling 7.3 million. Also, I want to add some additional requests. In discussing the fiscal year 25 budget request, the following community and economic development agencies will also be listed as special appropriations. So they'll be moving out of the CED department budget and into special appropriations. And I had a change there, so that's just a fiscal year 2025. Special appropriation request totals $7.4 million.
Is there a reason you pulled those out of the community and economic development piece?
Yeah, I can probably address that. So when we sat down and did that budget, we've got nonprofits that are part of county government and where there's a contract for specific services provided. As we went through those, these are the ones where there was really no specific, it wasn't a contract through a department from a service agency perspective. They really are special appropriations, basically sort of board decisions about what they are. Chantel, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, Mr. Manager, you're absolutely correct. As we've been going through the special appropriation process in the same way that we pulled Shepherd Center and Senior Services from Aging Services as a county department because they're not a county department, these particular organizations have been almost automatically granted these funds through community and economic development, but they really are not providing necessarily a particular service to community economic development. It certainly may be something that the board still wants to support, but just being in the spirit of what special appropriations were, we just wanted to be very transparent about it for you all to make these decisions in the same way.
Yeah, it's not saying there's not value in it. It's saying that they just really met the criteria around what was a special appropriation.
And so Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., we have a contract with, because it is not a government agency either. It's not on this list, and it's not on the special appropriations list, so.
But they are specifically providing recruitment services under a very specific
A contract. So the distinguishing factor is the contract. a contract to provide a service for the county.
That is correct. So Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. absolutely provides a contract for it. Now, you will see an alternate service level for Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. because they're asking for a position that isn't necessarily part of our contract. But when we talk about ASLs next week, you'll see that. But in general, they provide a core service for recruitment and retention of businesses. Kernersville Chamber of Commerce, as an example, does not do that, but it's more of a membership that we are part of with them.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
May I ask, do we have an annual payment that goes to the National Association of Counties?
We do.
A membership payment?
We do.
But that's not included as a special appropriation?
It is not.
And is there a rationale for that distinction?
This is exactly the conversation we had in the budget discussion around that as well. And we did not pick that one out in that same way. We certainly could.
I'm not arguing that we should. What comes to mind is if you have a contract for services, does that then guarantee a higher level of staff scrutiny of what is paid and what you get in return?
So what I will say is for contracts that are within departments, because we need a service, they are absolutely monitoring and what those outcomes are for that service because we need it. Otherwise, we would not be contracting with those organizations.
And the reason that comes to mind in this context is that I think that that's appropriate for a local government appropriation, that you have, if you're providing a significant amount of money to a community organization, it should be for a particular verifiable return. I'm not a fan of the special appropriations process, in case I hadn't mentioned that before, and would like to see it moving the other way. I would like to see the organizations that are clearly providing a community service that are currently reviewed under special appropriations process be moved instead to an appropriate departmental budget, where then what they're providing in return for the tax revenue that they get from us gets the same level of review as we would give departmental expenditures. Because when I look at some of the organizations that get recurring special appropriations, they're clearly providing a specific kind of service that is directly related to a core mission of county government, but they're treated as as special appropriations and are kind of lumped in with organizations that I can't say that about. So this is a broader discussion than
No,
maybe it was.
it's a very good one, because, and of course, while you're talking, I'm thinking Center for Creative Economy actually is basically training and supporting, incubating entrepreneurs, is what they're doing. And that is something that essentially some of our contract work with Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. is about. Not necessarily entrepreneurs, but supporting business and training employees, et cetera. I mean, there are lots of lines to kind of draw, and where they're boxes. Where should they be? What box should they be in? And I agree, that's a great point. That's an excellent point.
Anyway, thank you.
All right. So I did have some updates to the ASLs. This should look familiar to you guys. As Forsyth County prepares for fiscal year 2025, a key addition has been added to the ASLs. So the ASLs usually have the request, the summary, the recommendation, and board action, but they now include a table showing prior year government spending on all ASLs where there are prior year government spending.
and you will be getting that, all of those alternate service levels in a binder next week.
They have them.
We have, we already have. In fact, that is I felt that was I've been through it. I thought it was very helpful and also pretty tedious to put together. So I appreciate you assembling all that information together of other government spending.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. And I skipped over I was basically saying the rest of the alternate service levels that
That are
from
not
the
a part of
yeah,
this.
Yeah, we'll be coming to you next week.
Yeah, I just,
Gotcha.
but I mean, I appreciated that new format because that's something we have talked about before, and that was a good response to that, and it is complicated.
Yep. Aisha's done a great job with it.
I got 2 more slides here. So, and then I put a why include the total government funding. Access to comprehensive funding information enables the county to strategically plan and allocate resources effectively and meet community needs. And knowing all funding sources ensures transparency and accountability in how grants are allocated and utilized. And there was one other thing that was in that folder. There was a matrix. It was like a legal sheet matrix showing the FY24 government funding by source for each agency, the total county general fund funding for fiscal year 2024, and the total other county funding for fiscal year 2024, and then county and city funding for fiscal year 2024, plus the FY25 request by agency.
Yep, it's good. It's helpful.
And if you have any questions about anything in the folder, feel free to reach out to me.
Any other questions for Aisha? Thank you.
Thank you.
Aisha, very good.
So, Mr. Manager, I believe we're ready to review the items for our regular board meeting next Thursday on May 16th.
Very good. I was going to ask if anybody needs a recess, but I'll keep. We're good?
think we're
Maybe
okay.
An hour and 15 minutes? We're good? Okay. All right. Yep, the agenda items for May 16th. We'll go ahead and jump into these. The first item is a resolution recognizing May 19th through 25th of 2024 as Emergency Medical Services Week in Forsyth County. And so next week, there will be staff here to receive that resolution as we celebrate that work in the county. Item 2 is a resolution authorizing hiring and retention bonuses for full-time paramedic employees assigned to the Emergency Services Department. Shannon is going to come up, I believe.
Dudley, she just stepped out.
Did she? All right, well, we'll jump on through and bring her back in a minute. We'll get minutes taken care of. Item 4 is an amendment to the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. It transfers funds from inflation contingency for the Public Safety Center renovation project, and there's also an amendment to the PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. Kimberly Bussey.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. On March 2nd, 2023, this board approved a resolution authorizing an amendment to a contract with Davie Construction Company for the Public Safety Center upfit project to increase the total contract amount to $1,489,057. Funds were appropriated to the 2020 PAYGO Capital Project Ordinance in this amount. The resolution, however, also allowed for $75,000 in change orders, and these funds are now needed to complete the project billing. So this item amends the 2020 and the 2022 PAYGO Capital Project Ordinances to allow for a transfer of $75,000 of inflation contingency dollars to complete the Public Safety Center renovation project, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Kimberly?
Thank you, Kimberly.
We're good, thank you.
All right, agenda item 5 is a resolution accepting the guaranteed maximum price proposal and authorizing execution of the design build agreement for the Tanglewood Maintenance Building Solar Project. James Anderson is going to review.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you authorizes execution of the design build amendment with the contract with Renew Energy Solutions, LLC for the Tanglewood Maintenance Solar Project. Renew has submitted a guaranteed maximum price proposal of $163,568 to install a 91.68 kilowatt DC photovoltaic solar system. This is the maximum size system allowable under our contract demand with Duke Energy. The system will be grid tied with net metering. and it's anticipated it will offset 75 to 80% of the annual energy usage for the facility. Not accounting for time value of money, simple payback is approximately 18 years, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for James? Good, thank you.
Thank you, James. All right, I saw Shannon walked in, so I'll jump back to item 2, which is a resolution authorizing hiring and retention bonuses for full-time paramedic employees. Shannon's going to review this matter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So Forsyth County Emergency Services has a 50% paramedic vacancy rate, and we continue to experience sustained recruitment and retention challenges, which has created an urgent need to bolster efforts to retain and recruit employees in order to provide advanced life support services to the citizens of Forsyth County. Due to the staffing crisis, staff has recommended a sign-on and retention bonus to be implemented for newly hired and existing active full-time paramedic employees permanently assigned to paramedic positions in the Emergency Services Department. This would be funded through lapsed salaries for the remainder of fiscal year 2024 and through fiscal year 2025. To incentivize longevity of existing full-time certified paramedic employees working in permanently assigned paramedic positions in emergency services, the Human Resources Director recommends a $5,000 retention bonus for paramedic employees up through and including the rank of EMS shift captain, employees actively on payroll in such positions as of May 24th, 2024, and who remain active on payroll in such positions on June 21st, 2024, will be paid $2,500 on June 28th. And if they remain active on payroll in such positions as of May 23rd, 2025, they'll be paid $2,500 on May 30th, 2025. Additionally, to recruit qualified applicants and promote retention of newly hired paramedic employees, the Human Resources Director recommends a $5,000 hiring bonus to be paid in 3 installments over the course of 18 months for active paramedic employees hired between May 25th, 2024 and June 30th, 2025, and who are actively on payroll in such positions at the time of the bonus payment. The schedule of the payments will be $1,200 paid on the pay period following the 6-month anniversary, $1,200 paid on the pay period following the 12-month anniversary, and $2,600 paid on the pay period following the 18th month anniversary. And I'll be happy to take any questions. Chief Hunley is also here, and we'll take questions.
I'd just like to know the number of existing paramedics that are eligible for the retention bonus, and then I'd like to know what the number of vacancies we have in paramedics.
Right. So approximately 75 people today currently would be eligible for the bonus. Vacancies, let me back up a minute. So for positions, we have 105 total paramedic positions. We have 52 active paramedics only. That does not include any of the supervisory levels. 53 of those are vacant or filled with an EMT.
Say that again.
So we have 105 total paramedic positions.
Okay.
52 active paramedics in those positions. 53 are either vacant or we have them filled with an EMT.
Okay, got it.
So just to make it clear, so what we've done is because we had to staff trucks, we've put lower certified people in those. Got it, okay.
Yep, got it. So now I'm trying to come up with the 75. So of the 75 eligible for retention bonuses, we have 52 active paramedics. So is the difference between that and the 75, looking at 23 people?
Supervisors. So
Do we have a shortage in supervisors?
we do not. However, they are running calls. So they are working the calls. They are out there with the line, the line paramedics as well.
They're response paramedics.
Just curiosity about what percentage of time that a supervisor spends serving as a paramedic. And I assume they all are paramedics. And
They are.
And so they spend X amount of time serving as a paramedic.
Jody can answer that in more detail.
You're doing fantastic. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So the way, the response matrix that we have set up sends supervisors to a lot of the calls that we have. Motor vehicle accidents, cardiac arrests, significant breathing difficulties, if we have to paralyze patients, there's all kinds of things out there that require supervisory response to do that with. And so they're running, I don't know, probably 50 or 60% of their day is running calls on days that we're just super busy. So we've asked to apply this across the board because we're not yet in a position where supervisors are not running calls.
I don't really see us, because of the nature of the position, they're always going to run calls. I mean, that's what they do. So, I mean.
Okay, any other questions for Chief Hundley?
And I guess the other thing is this does mirror the detention center. You know, we implemented this and we're able to monitor kind of progress with the detention center. And so it's almost exactly that same metric.
It is.
Yeah. And so we're trying to apply that here. I do not expect the same kinds of success with this, just pure, this is going to take a number of really strategic fixes to get us where we need to be. And it's really a function of a very difficult market. And other people doing other things. I was talking to the Davidson County manager yesterday, and this conversation came up, and they're doing some things really because of the pipeline is just not there, and we're going to have to get that addressed. And the EMT level of certification is one way we're going to try to get this addressed, but I appreciate the work.
And I would argue that in the detention center situation, it was not primarily the bonuses, the retention and the recruitment bonuses either.
Could be.
And I would also argue the success, probably, that we have had some success, but that success was probably not due to the retention and recruitment bonuses. And I think you get my point.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that gets attention of applicants, and that's where we see we need help. So you got to do something to distinguish yourself. So.
Got it. Any questions? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. Agenda items 6 and 7, Aaron Sheldon's going to come up with public health and review their resolutions authorizing the purchase of vaccines from Santa Fe Pasteur. And there are two similar items. I'll let you review both those.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So I'm Erin Sheldon, and I'm here to present to you the resolution that will allow the Forsyth County Department of Public Health to purchase seasonal flu vaccines from Santa Fe Pasteur for the use in our vaccine clinics. This purchase order is an amount not to exceed $147,810.26 and is being purchased through the North Carolina statewide term contract 269B influenza vaccine. Reservations for the flu vaccine must be made in the springtime to ensure delivery for our fall and winter flu season. Do you have any questions about this?
Only is it how it distinguishes with the next item. How is it different?
So there is a difference. So this next item will allow Forsyth County Department of Public Health to purchase non-influenza vaccine from Santa Fe Pasteur for the use in the vaccine clinic. This purchase order is an amount not to exceed $160,000 and is being purchased through the MCAP Infused Group Purchasing Organization Agreement. This purchase order would be for all vaccines purchased through Santa Fe Pasteur, excluding the seasonal flu vaccine.
And really, I should have been more specific. Why is the state of North Carolina contract pricing not available for non-influenza vaccines? And that's why we're going through a different purchasing organization, MMCAP?
They are group purchasing organizations. Adam may be able to speak more to
You understand
distinguishing difference.
that part of what caught my attention is, why aren't we just using state price contract purchasing for both, influenza and non-influenza?
I reached out to the DOA with that question. I'm not sure exactly. They both originate through the MCAP Infuse purchasing agreement, but one of them is under state contract, and one for non-flu vaccine just isn't.
Sorry, just the last thing you said.
I'm not sure why the non-flu vaccines aren't. They are under the multi-state MCAP Infuse purchasing agreement, but there's not a statewide term agreement to it.
Okay, got it. But obviously, they're both pre-bid services that are available, and apparently there's no overlap between the state of North Carolina and or unless the state of North Carolina is buying them through the MMCAP thing.
Well, you're correct with the first part. Yeah, they are pre-negotiated and pre-bid, both of the agreements.
Mr. Chairman, if I can clarify, both of these are being purchased through the same Minnesota group purchasing organization. The only difference is, for some reason, which I don't know, the state explicitly allowed it for one set of vaccines, but they didn't explicitly allow it for the other. But we can still purchase under it as a group purchasing organization. So all of the vaccines are coming through the same system, really.
Okay. Thank you. No questions, unless anybody else has any. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank y'all. All right, Hassani Mitchell is going to come up and review item 8. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of agreement between Forsyth County and SG Atkins to provide services, administer grant funding to support the micro enterprise individual development account. Actually, a good example of a contract with a nonprofit that is kind of outside of special appropriations. So.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, so nice plug. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleasure to be before you all again today. This item is to approve an agreement to allow SG Atkins Community Development Corporation to administer match grant funding to the Forsyth County Micro Enterprise Individual Development Account participants. As you all are aware, this board did approve American Rescue Plan Act funding to expand the county's small business program. And as a part of that expansion, once the program participants complete our program, once they complete the training, once they complete the coaching, they are eligible to receive grant funding to help them purchase assets, to help them scale their business operations. And so Community and Economic Development, we have received separate funding from the Winston-Salem Foundation to provide those match grants to our program participants. And the board did approve that funding back in September of 2022. So this agreement would allow SG Atkins Community Development Corporation to disperse the Winston-Salem Foundation grant funding to our small business program cohort participants upon their successful completion of the program. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Hassani? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, agenda item 9 is also Community and Economic Development. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of agreement between Forsyth County and Forsyth Technical Community College to support and maintain the apprenticeship program. Andrea Sheets will review.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Always a pleasure to be in front of you. I know most of you are familiar with the Learn and Earn Apprenticeship program at Forsyth Tech. It's their adult work-based learning program where students are in classes part-time and working for an employer part-time, earning their credential with employment after they graduate. And so you all finished or funded this program about this time last year for about $110,000. And it's been funded previously with a variety of public and private sources, all of which have either gone away or have additional stipulations attached, which are fairly restrictive. And so that no-cost piece of the program is very important to students as they're earning a competitive wage. And so we are coming to you for funding again this year, as last year's funding was done in preparation for a state ask that we did not receive. We are asking the state legislature for that again. It's on Forsyth Tech's legislative agenda as well. And we are working with them to develop a long-term funding solution so that every year we're not coming back to you or the state. But that will take some time. And so this program gives us a competitive advantage when it comes to talent, and companies locating here. Our 48 employer partners love it, especially in the area of advanced manufacturing. And it ensures equity among large and small businesses to keep this program free.
And so the source of this is the economic development funds that the board had set aside and reserved, so it's not reaching into a pool of other money. So.
Thank you.
And we have already, remind me, have we already received a report that kind of showed our success of that first group?
Yes, absolutely. So there are 54 apprentices at 48 employer partners. That the demographics of that are half minority, exactly half, and those employer partners are 48 across employers as big as the hospitals to small, 35 head count mom and pop manufacturing shops.
That's good. It's a good success rate. Any other questions for Andrea? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item 10 is a resolution authorizing an amendment to the contract with FMRT Group for pre- and post-hire psychological and medical services. Randy Hunsucker with the Sheriff's Office will review.
Mr. Chairman, board members, good afternoon. As you know, FMRT provides our pre-hire fit-for-duty services. And following the market adjustments, the continuation of the signing bonuses and the return to fixed permanent shifts, the hiring of detention officers has really picked up. When we were preparing the previous amendment back in February, we only had invoices through January. In preparing this item today, we had data through March and recently just have received the April invoices. And we have a better picture of where it's kind of headed. The April invoice did drop quite a lot, down to $6,300 compared to the little chart. It's in your item. But we believe our best guess is, looking at everything, is we probably have topped out. And our team is starting to become more selective in our hiring. So we've probably peaked out, but we still think we'll be a little bit short. So the attached resolution approves increasing the not to exceed amount from the $150,000 amended amount up to $188,510, and we have identified funds in our operating budget to cover that. And once the final invoices do come in July for the June ones, anything that's not needed will immediately revert back to your general fund balance. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Randy? This is one that probably has it wrapped up in some good news part of it, so but that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. All right, agenda item 11 and 12 were handled by John Burgess, our tax administrator, last Thursday, and he'll obviously be here next Thursday if you have any other questions, but it was pretty straightforward. Item 13 is a resolution authorizing the purchase of a 2024 Ram 550 chassis from North Point Chrysler. Joey Hundley's going to come up and review that.
Good afternoon again. So there's probably some confusion on this, but as we've been talking a lot about fire vehicles, what you approved over the last month was a vehicle that we had been working on previously, and we worked through the process to get that approved. This is the start of vehicle number 2. So we are purchasing the chassis. We've got a quote on the chassis. This will be to purchase the chassis for that vehicle, which will be listed as 309, I think. And then we'll bring to you in the next session the item for the box to actually go on that. We found that it was a quicker process, at least in the fire vehicle perspective, to buy the chassis separate from the box than trying to package it all together. So that's what this is for.
Got it. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Agenda item 14 or 15 are both Scott Angels with General Services. Item 14 is a resolution awarding and authorizing a contract for the purchase of 3 Type 3 ambulances to Northwest Emergency Vehicles, LLC. And then he's got the purchase of 4 Ford Interceptor police pursuit vehicles. Scott.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board. If you recall, the Board approved the appropriation of $1.5 million for the purchase of 4 ambulances at the March 21st meeting. At that same meeting, the Board awarded a contract for the purchase of one of the 4 ambulances, that ambulance being a Ford E450 Type 3 unit. The contract was awarded to NWEV LLC, doing business as Northwestern Emergency Vehicles, and that contract was subject to the terms of the Houston Galveston Area Council, or HGAC, Cooperative Purchasing Program. So in efforts to source 3 more ambulances, staff reached out to 3 vendors to inquire about availability, timelines, and pricing for Type 3 E450 units. One vendor did not respond. Another vendor indicated they were 16 to 18 months out on receiving ambulances, and their price exceeded $320,000 per unit. Northwestern Emergency Vehicles indicated they could provide 3 more Ford E450 Type 3 units built to the county's specifications by the end of the calendar year. One ambulance can be provided as soon as June under the same fiscal year 2024 HGAC terms as the ambulance purchased in March, which would have a total unit cost of $268,607. Northwestern also communicated they can provide the 2 additional ambulances by December 2024 under HGAC's fiscal year 2025 terms, and the total cost for those 2 units is $552,118. So the total cost for all 3 units is $820,725, which covers the cost for options including graphics, a striker, stretcher, power load system, and LED warning lights. So this resolution awards a contract to NWEV LLC, who does business as Northwestern Emergency Vehicles, for the purchase of 3 Ford E450 Type 3 ambulances with options under the terms of HGAC contract AM10-23 in the total amount of $820,725. So we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Got a curiosity question. How all of a sudden are all these ambulances available when there had been no ambulances available? It's like somebody opened up the floodgates and said, we've decided to start making them again. We got the parts, we got whatever. I mean,
And I don't
I
have a good answer for that, to be honest with you.
Well, I think our response said that, I mean, Northwest Emergency, apparently they must be doing something to get some units in the, in production because the other responses were we're still 18 months out. So, I mean, and you got a way better price on it. It's remarkable. But I do think that Marketplace is reacting to this, and I had a little discussion around just in general that we need to quit assuming that that the marketplace is tight, because it's much less. It has eased up. You just got to find it now. You can go find the same old story. It's going to be, you can't get it. It's going to cost you $1 zillion. But I think the result is, if you look hard enough, you'll find somebody willing to do business at really the reasonable sort of old rate. Does that sound?
It could be just a manufacturer thing. The particular manufacturer that Northwest represents, their availability could be different than, let's say, somebody like Atlantic Emergency Vehicles represents. So there's a lot of factors there, but yeah.
I think it's a more competitive market, to your point.
And so when we get these delivered, are we in a whole lot better shape than we were with equipment?
Yeah, we are. And in fact, I would let Chief Hundley say it too. I mean, General Services in our fleet has risen to the occasion, gotten units back in shape. But I'll let Joey.
Yes, sir. We will be in a far better shape. We've had our ambulances, as I briefed to you last year when I was actually here. And then we had the presentation prepared for this year's workshop to talk about dates of boxes and just how many miles we're putting on ambulances based on the number of calls that we're running. And so this will help us with replacing some of those that need to be replaced that we hadn't had funding for to replace, based on the replacement cycle that we have revamped after looking at all of this stuff. And so it'll put us in a better place. And then we've got another plan moving forward with the budget to get the fleet back on track for replacement and remounting.
That's good news.
Sir.
Any other questions for the Chief or Scott? Thank you both. That's good news.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
So item number 15, the Sheriff's Office has immediate need to purchase 4 police pursuit vehicles to replace vehicles that were damaged in accidents and deemed to be total losses during this fiscal year. The Sheriff's Office desires to purchase Ford Interceptor police pursuit vehicles to replace the damaged vehicles. Staff researched the availability of the Interceptor and determined it is available under the terms of the bid awarded by the State Contract Purchasing Program to Capital Ford Incorporated. The fleet manager engaged Capital Ford and found the dealer currently has Interceptors in inventory available for purchase and is currently taking orders for the vehicles. Staff recommends accepting the bid offered by Capital Ford for the 2024 all-wheel drive V6 Ford Interceptor police pursuit vehicle and options as described in contract 2510A awarded by the state. Based on Capital Ford's bid, the cost of each Interceptor has a base unit cost of $41,203.20. Cost for options is $1,146.80 for a total unit cost of $42,350. And the overall cost for 4 Interceptors is $169,400. So this resolution awards a contract to Capital Ford Incorporated for the purchase of 4 Ford Interceptors and associated options in the total not to exceed amount of $169,400. With that, if you have any questions, we try to answer those for you.
Only a simple question, and that, how are we doing on insurance reimbursements on the wrecked vehicles issue? I know they're never worth what they are, but we've bought a few vehicles this year and a few wrecked issues involved. So what are we looking at in terms of revenue coming back on some of the totaled vehicles?
In terms of numbers, I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't know if somebody else.
That might, at the end of the fiscal year, that might be a kind of an interesting report.
Absolutely, it would be, yes.
So I just want to mention that the deductible on the auto is $25,000. And that's not of, necessarily the purchase price, but it's of the value of the car at that time. It's very rare that we meet that threshold when we have a police vehicle or just regular fleet.
So when you see revenue, it'll mostly be from where somebody else is at fault and their insurance company's taking care of it, so.
And none of those cars, insurance companies total things that are repairable. That does happen a fair amount of times, so I'm just kind of curious, is that ever a thought?
Yeah, maybe a better number is to show what we're selling total loss cars at auction. We'll try to get that picture for you, because, we actually get get more money than you'd expect from wrecked vehicles at auction, so that'll be the maybe we'll try to get that.
Any other questions for Scott? Thank you very much.
All right, so we're going to I think Kirby closes us out here. He's got 3 items. Item 16's going to talk about custodial services contracts, which we started out talking about this morning with the schools, and then he's got 2 property matters. So turn it over to Kirby.
Oh, goodness.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board. Appreciate the opportunity to present these items to you. I know it's been a long day, so I will move through them rather quickly. In terms of background on this item, General Services is of course committed to providing safe and clean county facilities. We have a facility services division as part of our department that uses county staff to service 9 facilities during the daytime, and then we clean 3 facilities at night with internal staff. That's the Government Center, the LADC, and the Public Safety Center. At the board's May 7th, 2020 meeting, yes, the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners awarded a contract for janitorial services to American Facility Services. That was a 5-year agreement for nighttime service to the other 18 facilities that we service. So to ensure a high quality level of service, we do regularly inspect those facilities. We want to make sure the contractor is doing their job. And unfortunately, despite an immense amount of support and guidance that we've given to that contractor, they really have struggled over time to deliver what we consider to be an acceptable level of service to our facilities. As a metric on that, our staff have entered 525 corrective work orders over the past 12 months. And so each one of those is something that we've gone out and seen, entered a work order and said this needs to be fixed. So that's a tremendous amount of support and guidance from our staff. So again, my point is not to beat up on the contractor, but they've struggled to provide that consistent level of service. And the question is why? When we look at it, we think they have inadequate staffing levels. They're having trouble hiring folks. You have staff turnover. That's pretty normal in that field. But I think the key is the level of supervisory support that the facilities receive. If you don't have a supervisor or sort of a senior staff member that's going behind folks and saying, hey, you missed this, don't leave yet. that you're going to get bad service. And I think that's sort of what we're experiencing there. So we think, and again, not everything is terrible. There are some facilities that are okay. I think, or we feel like the contract is almost just too big for one person or one company to manage. So if we remove a few key facilities from that contract, the idea is that then that contractor can retain their current staff and redirect them to the remaining facilities to provide a higher quality of service. So we sent out a request for proposal under sort of that idea in March for nighttime cleaning services to the new courthouse and to our branch library locations. The RFP, and again, we were trying to qualify bidders so that we could accept the lowest price of qualified bidders. So what we did is we said, this is the minimum number of daily service hours that we can accept. It was what we're receiving now that we put in the bid. So for instance, the courthouse, we have 42 hours of service each night at the courthouse. So we said we need 42 hours of service. You can do it with 4 people, you can do it with 40 people, but we need 42 hours of service. That was the minimum number. And we said, if you can meet the minimum number, we'll pursue the lowest price. So that's what the RFP said. The idea, too, in the past has been sort of this economies of scale approach where we've required folks to bid on all of the facilities, thinking that we would get a better price. Well, you know, we wanted to open up the contract for competition. And we wanted to extend an opportunity really to our local and smaller companies to compete. And so what we did is we said in that RFP, you can bid on one or all of them. Now we'll go in and look at the pricing of it, but we opened it up to say, you know, you bid on what you can provide. In other words, that kind of lets some of those smaller companies get in and provide pricing. So it was a little bit of an experiment. We weren't sure what we would get back. So we sent out the bid to 113 companies. This is through our purchasing department, and we received 15 responses. That's a healthy response rate. The contractors who proposed an amount of daily cleaning hours less than the required minimum were deemed non-responsive. So that was how we qualified them. The A+ Group, LLC, a certified MWE vendor based in Durham, was the lowest responsive bidder for the courthouse, and they proposed a 3-year cost of $551,000. I will say that we interviewed these folks before we brought you the contract, and we're very impressed. The A+ Group, while they're out of Durham, just finished a contract cleaning the Durham courthouse, which is great experience. They have some experience at universities, and they are in our community now at the School of the Arts, so they have some local presence. Cleaning Matters LLC is also a certified MWE vendor. They're out of Winston. They were our lowest responsive bidder for branch libraries and proposed a 3-year cost of $215,000. Again, we interviewed them and we're very impressed with how they were going to kind of attack the branch libraries. Those are really difficult because they're all around the county. And they actually proposed sort of a regional response to libraries, which was a very smart way to approach that. And they have experience cleaning the City of Winston facility. So we did our homework on them to make sure they were reputable companies, and they certainly are. So in summary, we do recommend awarding a contract for janitorial services to the A+ Group for the courthouse in the not to exceed 3-year amount of $551,329.73, and to Cleaning Matters LLC for the branch library locations in the total not to exceed amount of $215,949. And so when we do that, we'll obviously remove those facilities, if approved by the board, from our current agreement. And if approved by the board, it will save the county $35,585 in fiscal year '25. So that's the amount that we would have been paying our current provider on top of what these folks proposed for those facilities. So when we step back and say, was that bidding process a little bit of an experiment successful? I really think that it appears to have been successful. It increased competition. When we bid janitorial services in 2020, we got 6 responses. We got 15 this time. And we actually had folks call us and say, thank you for letting me bid, which I thought was just really sort of neat. I get excited about that type of stuff. It allowed for a diversity of participation. We had a large array of companies. We had big companies, we had small companies bidding, and it decreased the county's overall cost. I put a bullet in here, oftentimes the work of our facility services team, which is actually our largest division in terms of employees, goes unnoticed. And they do a tremendous job. They are our only division that provides services over 2 shifts. And the employees of that division and the management of that division just put their heart and soul into what they do here, and I'm just really thankful for them. I just have to say that. I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Two quick ones.
Yes, sir.
One in terms of, I assume you probably talked to the Durham people about how, I mean, they're like the courthouse, for example. I assume they did good work.
Good reference. They were just underbid. That's why they don't have a contract now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, okay, yeah.
They had just ended their Durham courthouse contract? Yes,
Got it. Second thing is the vendor, not the name for doing the libraries.
Cleaning Matters.
Just an odd, this is more an observation than a question, but, and they also bid on the courthouse, and they were like one of the highest bids. But they were the lowest bids on the library.
Yeah.
And that just struck me as a really odd
It is.
deal.
The courthouse is a difficult building to bid. It's huge. And so Cleaning Matters is, I think, a very good company. We're excited to work with them. They are a smaller company. And so when they go into a building that's 160,000 square feet or whatever it is, I think it's hard sometimes to conceptualize what that's going to take.
Makes sense.
And whereas A Plus Group's the larger company.
That sounds like a really good success, so.
I hope so.
Any other questions for Kirby?
All right. While Kirby's pulling up the next two items, I'll just introduce them so you can go there. Both property matters. Item 17 is a resolution authorizing execution of a consolidated and restated lease agreement with Horizons Residential Care, and there's also a lease agreement with Forsyth County and AeroX for county-owned property at the radar tower.
Thank you, sir. As background on the Horizons item, in 1977, the Board of Commissioners authorized a 99-year agreement with Horizons Residential Care Center. That was for lease of approximately 35 acres of county-owned real property located in Rural Hall. It's Horizons Park, and that's 100 Horizons Lane. In May of 2017, the board approved an amendment to that lease, which basically reduced that leasehold size at the request of Horizons to 9.4 acres. It went from 35 to 9.4. And that was for a variety of reasons. And it really opened up sort of that western side of what was the Horizons campus for county use. Horizons Residential Care Center has received $1.9 million in ARPA funding, and the purpose of that was to construct 2 6-bed homes on the premises for use by intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals. So when they lay that out and sort of what that site plan looks like, in order to meet the setbacks and the code requirements that they have, they do need to expand their leasehold premises by another 4.4 acres. So that would take the lease to a combined 13.969 acres. And I will say I really appreciate them surveying that out so we can see specifically where those lines are, so those acreages are defined. And so if approved, I will note that the county attorney recommends executing a consolidated and restated form of lease, and that's simply because the original lease was signed in 1977. Here's what the existing lease profile looks like right now. It orients you to the Horizons campus. When you drive by Horizons, if you look at the superintendent's house and you shoot a line between that and this cottage here, the baby cottage, that's kind of the lease line. And so what's called the cannery here in the back, I believe, is used as a maintenance shop now. The boys' cottage, I think, is more of an administration building now, and then you have the main building as the atrium here. And again, that's an approximate drawing of what the board authorized in 2017. So here is an approximate drawing of how that would look if amended. And so you have the existing leasehold, again, that we just saw kind of in this more opaque color, and then the proposed addition, the acreage that would be proposed, is kind of back to the north and then to the east of the existing campus. And then this is Dr. Bradshaw's MICDC property here that the board recently authorized a lease renewal of. I think down the road, there could be some discussion between Dr. Bradshaw and Horizons of how to use that property. I'm not sure kind of where that'll end up. But I think that Horizons probably does have some long-term potential use of that, depending on what happens with Dr. Bradshaw's property and how the board sees that property developing into the future. So as in quick summary, the existing Horizons Residential Care Center lease consists of 9.4 acres. It'll expire in October of 2076. I'll be 91. Under the current and proposed leases, Horizons Residential Care Center is responsible for all costs associated with the property. We don't do anything out there. We do share the septic system that Horizons installed in 2017. They have requested an additional 4.4 acres, again, to expand their campus to construct these 2 6-bed homes. And again, if authorized, attached to the resolution is the restated form of lease agreement that the county attorney recommends using. I'll note just quickly that Richard Anderson, the CEO of Horizons Residential Care Center, and Paul Meyer with Workplace Architectural Design, I hope I said that right, he's their partner there. He's working with Horizons on their design of this campus, are here. If the board has any questions about this request or the project in general, I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Any questions for Kirby? Good.
All right, last item. As background on this item, AeroX, a local nonprofit that the board has recently heard from, has requested to lease the rooftop area of the Union Cross Radar Tower, which is of course located in Union Cross Park, for a period of 3 years. They do plan to install a rooftop-mounted radar unit, and they propose to use roughly 25 square feet of the rooftop area. The radar unit, which is part of their Project Atlas, will support the development of an advanced air mobility system and is funded by a grant they received from the state. Project Atlas aims to address what they call the beyond visual line of sight hurdle, and it intends to create a situational awareness tool to allow drone operators to fly long distances and understand where traditional aircraft are flying at low altitudes. Project Atlas, according to AeroX, will enhance operational capabilities in Forsyth and track businesses. It has a couple of applications that include medical and retail delivery, infrastructure inspection, and public safety. The lease proposal is for 3 years. It would be effective after the tenant has acquired all of their permits, or July 1 of this year, whichever occurs first. The proposed rental rate is $1,000 a month. That's a difficult lease to comp because you're basically sticking something on top of a building. But $1,000 in negotiation with both parties sort of felt right. In terms of responsibilities, are relatively low on the county side. We do just continue to maintain the radar structure, including the roof. The tenant, of course, would install and maintain its own equipment. They would provide their own utilities, and they're responsible for making sure everything works there. And this is sort of what that looks like. This is the Trosa property to the left. This is Union Cross Park to the right. This sort of blue area here would be the permitted access area for AeroX coming down here to the radar tower, which is the structure highlighted in green there. And it's sort of neat that the radar tower used to be used as a radar tower, and now it'll have another radar on top of it if approved by the board. And I'll say that Basil Yap, the president of AeroX, is here if the board has any questions. And of course, I'm happy to answer them as well.
And maybe Basil can, since he's been here for a while, answer the question. I assume our drone experiment with the sheriff's office, this will allow that to actually happen.
Yes, sir. It will allow that to, in fact, expand. I don't know if you're aware, but yesterday we had a successful demonstration of an AED delivery, which was really exciting down in Clemens. And so looking at all rural areas of Forsyth County, this is what this will be covering.
And your other radar, is it on top of the water tower in Clemens?
It will be, yep,
It will be,
in the Clemens area, yep. So we'll have the overlap of the downtown area.
So you'll have coverage of Forsyth County and beyond with the two?
That's correct, and beyond.
And operational when?
Well, once we get it installed, we need to flight test it, and then we should have it operational by the end of the year.
That's good news. That's good news. Any questions for either Kirby or Basil?
I'll just note, I think it's pretty exciting to say you've revitalized a radar tower from the 1970s back to, again, another radar tower. So that's, not many people can say that. So.
It's cool.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you both.
Good thing we didn't tear it down. Right?
Say what?
Good thing we didn't tear it down.
Right.
I said that for Commissioner Linville's benefit. So. All right. Two reports, third quarter human resource report for fiscal year 2023-24 and the March 24 contribution-based benefit cap report. And that is it, Mr. Chairman. And I will say we've committed to trying to give you the correspondence regarding the Piedmont hoist and crane work that's being done by minor and environmental protection and
That's in
assistance.
this stack of papers.
It is, and I did send it to both Mr. Mahaffey and Ms. Seabrook, so, Seabolt.
May I speak to this, please? Because on the second page, it says that they have not had any phone calls from the neighbors since February 6th. Well, they may not have had phone calls, but I have. And I can tell you that these neighbors aren't going to be calling any longer because they don't think that anything's ever going to happen. They've given up. And I did notice in this letter that at one time, the facility considered using a laser technology instead of blasting, but now they have decided not to consider that idea. It seems like to me that that would have really been helpful to these neighbors. I don't know if there's anything we can do or not, but if not, we need to tell these people there's nothing we can do, so they don't have to keep worrying about it.
Yeah, there's two letters. There's one dated February 15th, 2024, and one April 25th, 24. So on the 15th, mine are saying that they had no additional contact with the facility or the neighbors since February 6th. The April letter basically outlines that there has been other contact. In fact, we've had staff go back out there, and so they are still calling, and we are still sending staff out there. We can have some offline conversations about how we want to proceed, but this is kind of an update, and it is a tough situation.
Well, I appreciate the update, and I'm sure the neighbors will, but nothing ever changes for them. And
yeah, I mean, the decibel levels that have gone down some, even between the two reports. Is it sufficient? Is it enough? Is it does it violate the county's noise ordinance? Those are other conversations to have. So,
Which in the noise ordinance, we did not put a decibel rating number, right?
There's not a decibel level number. There's a description of what might be construed as is in violation.
Following up on that, I thought that we were told that they couldn't enforce because it didn't hit a certain number.
I'll just weigh in. The manager is correct. There's no certain level in our ordinance right now. There are other communities that do have decibel level limits, and the limits, the measurements that have most recently been measured out there would not violate these other ordinances that do have a specific decibel level. It's more on the line of traffic noise level now. I know the folks there think it's annoying, but that's where we are.
Right. But to the degree that we were told that they couldn't enforce because it didn't hit a certain decibel level, that was a misunderstanding of the code, of our code.
There was a decibel level mentioned at one time that we mentioned here to include in the final version. It was not, and my recollection is about 100 decibels.
There was I believe, a wedding venue that some neighbors were complaining about, and we explored the same issue of whether or not our noise ordinance should have a decibel level in it. I believe when Minor went out to measure the noise at that wedding venue, it was not as high a decibel level as was thought, and so again, it would not have violated what other communities have done in terms of putting in a decibel level. But in the end, you're correct. We did not change our ordinance to adopt any specific decibel level.
We got into issues of deputies with sound stuff on their phones, and are they calibrated, and are they this, and are they that. We got into a big technical discussion about enforcing it with that is how it sort of manifests itself. And I actually think the deputy, particularly a couple of them that worked out there, actually helped resolve, I don't know if resolve is the right word, but reached an agreement between parties with some limitations, as I recall. There was a lot of details on that.
It seems to me that we've reached a point where what Commissioner Whitson is hearing is quite reasonable if they keep making complaints that it is an unreasonably loud, disturbing noise, and our staff keeps concluding that we can't enforce it, then they're wasting their time and we're wasting ours. But I think that essentially means that our noise ordinance is meaningless, and I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, I would suggest that there has been a tremendous amount of energy both on the neighbors' behalf and on our staff's behalf to try to communicate with the business around this issue, and that the noise level out there today is lower than it would be otherwise had we not been through everything that we've been through. I think this board got the attention of the business because they felt compelled to at least come talk to the chairman and myself about the issue. As hard as this sounds, I think what I would, if Ms. Seabrook called me today, I would say, stay the course. It's either going to get better or worse, and if it gets worse, we need to know it. There have been lots of things tried. The company put some barriers up that were not very effective, and we learned that pretty quickly. But
I think for me, if the company were to come in with a request to expand and go beyond their current zoning, I'd be a little hard pressed to support that. And I think that's
been communicated. And I think
that's been communicated pretty directly, and which maybe tells me there are certainly no plans for that at the moment in that regard. But and I don't know, maybe Gordon can attest to the next. I mean, I guess we have no. I'm trying to get at where our ability to do something about it, particularly when you get into numbers, because the decibel ratings are lower. It is just an ingratiating. It's this, scraping your fingers on a blackboard doesn't violate a decibel meter, but it's the kind of thing that can send you into orbit. And I think that's what we're dealing with, and so the question kind of becomes one of the language of our ordinance, and is that something that a court would deal with? And I don't know where that's I don't know.
I think that your comment is exactly on point. What they've said to me all along is it's not the noise level per se, it's the nature of the noise.
Right, and the dust.
Yes.
That we have given the availability of numerous community witnesses as to the, in their viewpoint, unreasonably disturbing nature of the noise, that we have the makings of a classic test case for the effectiveness of our ordinance. And my question would be, why haven't we moved forward to put together that case? Or actually, more bluntly, a suggestion that we should, at this point, move forward to put together that case that the company is not taking voluntary steps. And we've sort of had this discussion in closed session, but it hasn't moved forward, and so I'm publicly making the suggestion that we should put that together.
Yeah, seems like there needs to be some consequence and something that could be done.
Gordon, we'll work towards a set of steps that involve that. So.
Before we adjourn, we brought up the issue of additional kind of our meeting schedule. We did talk about moving the hearing on June 10th to 6 p.m. I have responded to a number of emails to that effect, that essentially our budget work session does not allow public comment anyway. It's not a public comment time. It is I've seen the word transparent about 80 times, and it's about as transparent as you can get. So on TV, you can watch it over and over and over. You can listen to what exactly is said, and we don't allow public comment, and I think that's within our jurisdiction to establish that and do the work. People want to, and I have had a couple of very thoughtful emails, which I spent time with a couple back and forths, which were very good. And that's what communication, I think, with commissioners should be about, is thoughtful kind of issues. And where you can talk about it and explain, and if the question gets articulated, et cetera. And I don't see anything that's preventing anyone from doing that. And I'm making the assumption that this body agrees that we're fine with leaving the work sessions, not changing the time for those. And I believe Commissioner Woodbury mentioned the issue of the actual adoption date. Well, at that point, it's all over but the action. And so having that meeting at night would seem to be, that's almost anticlimactic. We have met, kind of had all this discussion and kind of agreed on where we were, and then that was the formal action was to follow. So if I'm making the wrong assumptions on this and something else needs to be said, let's get it said.
Thank you for opening up the moment for dialogue. So, of course, by way of proper order, there would be some, I would assume that meeting is going to be on a regular meeting night where there are public comments allowed. And therefore, when we vote ultimately on the budget, then, there would be public comments that night, which would still, in my opinion, provide some sense of, I would say, direction on behalf of the citizens to those whom they have elected, unless this meeting that we adopt the budget is not a regular board meeting, and it's more of a briefing style, which is antithetical to me of when we should vote on the budget. And therefore, again, give the citizens an opportunity to make public comments before we take that final vote. So am I mistaken about the structure of the meeting when we adopt the budget?
Yeah, so there generally are not comments. There's at the special meeting for the potential budget adoption on the 13th, you generally don't open back up for public comments. The idea is that you've gotten those public comments at the public hearing, which would now be moved to the 10th at 6. Otherwise, you end up with really 2 public hearings on the budget, and you're hearing the other public hearing comments on the budget after the document has already been prepared. And so that's certainly a board decision, but I don't think very many communities essentially have 2 public hearings on the budget. It's a public hearing, there's deliberation, and then the board takes action on it.
I guess it's a little confusing, but at the end of the day, my point is that I would like to see the meeting before the budget is adopted, giving citizens an opportunity to have public comments before we take a vote to finalize the budget. That's my point. So the way that is structured, again, based on what you said, it's a little confusing to me, but, we can move forward. So again, just to be clear, before we take a final vote on the budget, I would hope that there is a meeting where there are public comments and it is a 6 o'clock meeting.
And I guess I just see exactly what the county manager said. We don't need to have 2 public hearings. We would hear the same information again on the second one, I think. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna hear, a lot of comments, probably 40 or 50. We're gonna spend 2 whole days. We've digested that. We've heard them. We're going to ask questions and discuss that budget for 2 full days, all of which are available online at night if somebody wants to read them. And they can send an email that night, which we will be seeing them. I mean, we're right there. It's in the process. And then on Thursday, we even reserve the time on Thursday morning, to continue any final discussion issues. And then on the Thursday afternoon, have a special meeting and approve. I just don't see I don't see any value to a second time of that. I have mentioned to people that just like, next Thursday, for example, we have a regular meeting. We have a public comment session. And if people want to comment on that, or if they want to send something to us, they want to call in or whatever, they may do so in any regular meeting. And I guess there are 2 prior to June the 10th. So there's 2 more public comment opportunities between now and June the 10th, if my calendar stuff is correct.
For the record, since I get a lot of these contacts, we all get a lot of these contacts too, I think that the moving the 2 p.m. to a 6 p.m. public hearing, which we've already agreed to do, is probably the most significant thing for meaningful public input in this case, in that will be several days before the scheduled final vote. I am an advocate for having voting meetings scheduled at evening times more generally, because there are on a recurring basis any number of matters that are up for public hearing, as well as the open public hearing comment period, where we would have more opportunity for direct public input, a better opportunity, I should say, for broader public input if it's evening hour scheduled rather than early afternoon scheduled. I think there is a good argument for having purely briefing meetings during the day when we can have more complete staff availability for the input from staff and discussion. But I do think that it would be, in the long run, better for broader public input to us at voting meetings, were we to move voting meetings to 6 o'clock.
I agree with Commissioner Bessie in that sentiment. I think that there's just, obviously, a difference of opinions of how we directly or indirectly, manifest democracy. So, the citizens can be here at that point and have access to our discussions, whether they can say anything or not. I think it says something about them having direct access to us as we are discussing the budget, because there's always a time after, the budget that, if they wanted to talk to us at that moment in person, they could, or, of course, Dr. Martin, I understand your point that, after we have discussion, they could maybe call us up because they've watched the meeting. And, my main point is that I think it becomes sort of frustrating for the citizens of this county to not have access to us when the majority of them can actually come to the county to engage. And I think maybe the key terminology is just effective engagement, because they're here and present and, have access to the process. So, at the end of the day, if the decision is, as we did last year, to make sure that citizens have an opportunity before we take our final vote to have say so, because just maybe it could influence one of us to decide something differently when we take the final vote. I think that is the most important part of this process, in my opinion.
If there's anyone else like to say anything, say it. Otherwise, I think we're sort of set for this year, and here we are.
As we were last year.
Yes. Okay. I will say this is National Teacher Appreciation Week, by the way, and I should have thought of that this morning, which I didn't, so I apologize for that. All right. Anything else? Good order. We're good. Adjourned.